Question number 2 of the PhilNITS FE morning portion of the exam. In this question, we are being asked, what is the decimal equivalent value of the octal number 1234.2? This question is a little bit tricky, and in fact, I didn't get the correct answer, which is B, because I chose letter C, and I think it's related to what we understand octal to mean, because what we have to do here is we have to get the decimal equivalent of the octal number 1234.2. Now, I did recall 8 from the word octal, which sounded like octave in music, and I also remembered binaries where you got ones and zeros and converting ones and zeros to decimal. And I thought that maybe I could do something like that here as well. So what I did was to list down the eights, 8, and then multiply it to itself. But here's the big mistake that I did, which led to even more problems for me. And that's why I ended up choosing the wrong answer. Because actually, what I did was, instead of multiplying 8 to itself, I multiplied 8 to 2, which is what I got here, 16. Because 8 times 8 should be 64, not 16. Which led me to a totally different answer from any of the choices. So if we look at the equation from something like this, which is actually close to the correct answer, I ended up with an answer that is not in any of the choices. A product that is not in any of the choices. See, there's no 184 here at all. Now, the next thing also that I thought of was, okay, so maybe we could find the more or less right answer, even though we don't get to compute the exact number. And I went with doing something like, okay, so if this were in decimal, then decimal numbers would have tens, right? So in the first digit, for example, in the ones place, the number of digits that you could come up with would be 10, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then the next one would have another set of numbers. And I thought that if we're going for the maximum, then we just multiply them. There are 4 digits here, excluding the decimal place first. The one after the dot, we'd get 10 times 10 times 10 times 10, which is 10,000, the maximum. Now, that's too much because we're not doing decimal yet. We are doing octal first. So if this were octal, how would it be? What is the maximum? Now, before I went there, I also thought of twos because I was thinking about binaries. What would be the maximum if we did twos? And I ended up with 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is 16. And that is really low. Now, if it were 8, 8 times 8 times 8 times 8, we'd get something like 4,106. And if we look at the choices, it appeared to me that as we go down the numbers from 10 to A to 2, the maximum becomes lower as well. And if we're going for 8, then it seemed to me that C would be the best guess because C is 1542.5. It could be B as well. That's why I also checked if somehow, okay, I think it's C, but can I get to the actual number myself? And what happened was I came up with this bizarre equation where I was using the decimal equivalent, which is, for example, in the thousands place, the maximum would be 10,000. And then I thought that in 10,000, how many eights could there be? So I divided it by 8 and did the same with the rest. And somehow, lo and behold, I arrived with 1542.5, which is the answer to letter C. However, I also was wondering how come I get here the exact number when I haven't added the number after the decimal point, which is the hundredths place. So I thought that there has to be some explanation, and because I couldn't really also arrive at letter B, I thought maybe it was not really significant. It was so far off in the actual number in the end that it doesn't really matter as much. And so I ended up choosing C, which is the wrong answer. Because after trying it out using another equation, and this one I was looking it up and saw from Google's AI overview that the way to compute for the decimal from Octal is actually pretty much what I was doing already at the start. If only I didn't make a mistake with the 8 times 8 because I used 16 instead of 64. And it was quite a big boo boo for me, I think. Making that mistake leading to another answer that somehow seemed also okay, but in fact isn't. And the way to solve it is really to have the eights lined up in this way, where you, for example, have the 8 and then 8 squared. That's the 8 times 8, and then 8 cube 8 times 8 times 8. And also, the first one here, the ones place doesn't have an 8 because it's similar to 2 raised to 0, which is 1. 8 raised to 0 is also 1. Anything raised to 0 is 1. That's why you end up with something like this. And if we just do the math, we'll have the answer somewhere in the range that we are going for. And also, as I was doing this, I made a mistake also with this one, I already was checking the correct solution to get the octal to decimal. And of course, had to plug in the numbers from the question. And I was also making some mistake here because I divided it by 4 when it's supposed to be an equation, and the other side should have a divided by 4 as well if I did that. But I didn't do it. And that's why I later on found out that the answer isn't in any of the choices also, which led me to look at the steps again and found that I did something wrong with this part. And I had to multiply it with 4, which led me to 668, which is what the answer in letter B is without the hundredths place yet. And if you want to be correct and just want to check the hundredths place, what the value would be, then it's supposed to be something like this. We have the 2 there, and we can see that we would have to have the hundredths place put in this way, 1 over 8. And then 2 divided by 8 gives us what? It gives us actually 1/4 or 25.25. That's why the correct answer, which is letter B, is 668.25. That is the exact answer for this question.